Day. Chad Brendel, Bearcat Journal, great friend of the show. He joins us. There he is. Thank you very much, Chad, for being a part of our show. 365 Sports, Craig Smoke and Paul Catalina, David Smoke as well. So I saw where we'll talk about football, but the basketball team seemed like they were able to kind of reload with Krissa. They got Celestine, who was just signed. How have they done with that portal about to wrap up?
Good. I mean, they made the trade with Baylor, Celestine for Dan Skilling, straight up.
Yep.
So that worked out pretty well. But obviously, the gem right now is Mustafa Cham from UCF, who was a high 4-star, 5-star, depending on where you looked, coming out of high school. Had a really good freshman season for UCF. 7'2", 7'6" wingspan. Has some offensive skill and 2.7 blocks a game. He's an elite rim protector. So that's kind of the crown jewel of what they were able to do with their transfer class. The big thing for me, they added some toughness. This was not a particularly tough or physical team last year. They were talented, but when the chips were on the table, I don't want to say they were soft, but they were soft. And you went out and you got Sincere Harris, who was maybe the best perimeter defender in the Big 12 last year at West Virginia. You got an old friend of the Big 12 in Kerr Kriisa from his time at Arizona. So you get in West Virginia. So you add him and Harris to kind of help that guard rotation. Those two guys, not only tough, but, Kriisa will talk a little bit. We'll let you know when things are going well and when they're not. And then, Celestine gives him a shooter. And then a guy that doesn't get talked about as much, he was first team all-conference in the Atlantic 10, is Jalen Haynes from George Mason, who is generously listed at 6'8", 265. Probably a little closer to 280 if I had to guess. But a big guy that's got some good footwork, good hands, can pass, can shoot. But more importantly, gives them a guy that can score on the blocks, which they just didn't have last year. So the roster needed an overhaul to go along with the return of Jizzle James and Day Thomas. And Wes Miller did a good job getting it done. Also, 5-star Sean Abayev comes in as a freshman. And then top 50 point guard Keyshawn Tillery coming in as well. So it's going to be an entirely new look, like most of the conference, for Cincinnati.
Dylan Mitchell left and went to St. John's. He was about 10 points a game last year. He's a really talented player. Do you feel they filled that void? Or did it always feel to you like Cincinnati was going to be a stopover for him?
No, I mean, I think they, in a perfect world, they would have liked to have kept Dylan, but you get into what role do you see him in? They wanted to get more talented offensively. Dylan is a good offensive player, but he's not somebody that you run offense through. They will be hurt by losing his defense and his rebounding and his ability to get out and transition and score. But I think they learned last year this league is very physical. And when you got into, Norchad Omier and JT Toppin and Josh Jefferson and some of the more physical players in this league, Dylan was about 210 pounds. And I think he had a hard time physically keeping up with some of those guys. And because he really didn't have much of a perimeter game, his offense was very reliant on the games that they could get out in transition. When they were stuck in the half court and really had to grind things out, Dylan didn't have a lot to his offensive arsenal that provided much. So I think it worked out for the year that he was here, but I think he's probably going to a much better fit the way Rick Pitino is playing at St. John's right now. And I think Cincinnati was looking for more of a physical presence, the closer they get to the rim.
Chad, so the second lap around the Big 12 will be complete here in a few weeks once the spring semester wraps up. How do you feel like Cincinnati athletics, primarily in the big sports, football and basketball, learned lessons from year one, applied those, made changes, and how do you feel like Cincinnati just sort of still navigating their way, trying to find success, how they've been able to manage over the last couple seasons?
I think the learning curve was steep. I think a lot of people inside the building knew that it was going to be a challenge. I think the fan base is still catching up to the fact that, I mean, we talked about this a lot on Bearcat Journal. Like that first year, football-wise in the Big 12, teams would come out of the opposing locker room at Nippert Stadium, and the first thought would be, those guys don't look like the guys wearing black. And last year, I think you saw a lot of progress to look more like a Big 12 team. And from what we've seen this spring, a good example is like a defensive end. In the American Conference, you can get away with 6'2", 260-pound defensive ends. That doesn't work in the Big 12. Those guys better be 6'4", 6'5", and twitchy and fast off the edge and able to get after the quarterback. Your offensive line needed to be a lot bigger and a lot longer. Your wide receivers needed to be more athletic. I mean, they've had problems in both seasons finding a wide receiver core that at the boundary or at the field wide receiver and in the slot could get open. And I think they've done a much better job kind of building the roster towards what they've seen in the Big 12. In basketball, it's a monster. Like, everybody kind of figured Cincinnati was going to be right in that 6 to 8 range in the conference, and the roster just didn't click. They didn't, Dan Skillings didn't take the jump that many expected last year. Simas Lukosius was really effective at the 4 2 seasons ago at Cincinnati. With Dylan Mitchell, he got moved to the 3, and Dylan Mitchell played the 4. I thought he had trouble kind of getting open and providing the shooting on the perimeter that they thought they were going to get. So the roster ultimately didn't work. And I think that's why you're seeing a different strategy from Wes Miller, a little bit more attitude, a little bit more toughness. Because if you're not physical and tough in this league, you don't stand a whole lot of a chance. You have to be skilled. You have to be talented. But, boy, you better be physical and tough or you don't stand any chance getting into the upper half of the league.
There's no question that we've seen teams that have been really, really good. We've seen how they've had to remake their roster. Word I got, part of what Baylor's trying to do is go back to what they did so well, which was be tough, physical inside, because they were like a wet piece of paper in some cases.
Yeah.
Not just because of the lack of height. They didn't knock anybody on their ass.
It's really interesting. I asked Scott Drew after the loss at Cincinnati, when Ojenwuna was out, and they were kind of trying to rediscover themselves. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, 4 or 5 years ago, I would have been able to go out and get a backup 5. And I would have had him on my roster and ready to go. But with NIL, you're spending so much money on Omier, and you're spending so much money on Edgecombe, and you're spending so much money on Rob Wright that you don't maybe have that ability at every position to look exactly like you want to look. And I think that's part of what coaches are learning as this portal and NIL era develops. You're not going to be perfect because generally you don't have, just unlimited resources to go be perfect too deep at every position. So you've got to allocate your resources wisely. And I think everybody gets caught up, right, in scoring and shooting and things that are obviously important. But boy, you better be tough too. You better be able to rebound. You better be able to stop somebody, and be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And I think teams are kind of going more back towards that in their roster construction now. And it's going to be fascinating because this league is going to look insanely different next year than it looked this past season.
Yeah, you've got like half the teams had like one guy stay.
Yeah,
and you got to build out from there. Football wise, transfer portal has looked kind of exciting for Scott Satterfield, especially with Joe Cotton coming in. The top FCS. Maybe the top FCS transfer at any position because he's such a talented offensive lineman. But it looks like they got some of those wide receivers you were talking about. Do you feel that this portal class can come in and help push them over the line, especially since Sorsby is now there and established and ready to go?
Yeah, I do. I got a name for you guys that I think you're going to really love watching in Big 12 play this year. Jeff Caldwell. He was at Lindenwood. And he said he talked to us in the offseason or during spring ball, said he was 5'8" going into his senior year of high school. He is now 6'5". He is top 22 miles an hour on the catapult. And he has a 40-inch vertical leap. Like wow. the kid is a freak. And, just one of those late bloomer guys that he has really impressed this spring. They went and got Cyrus Allen from Texas A&M at wide receiver. They got a couple really good safeties, including Christian Harrison, Rodney Harrison's son from Tennessee. And then Joe Cotton, like you said, they had a hole at left tackle. John Williams, who's probably going to get drafted this weekend, was a rock solid left tackle for them last year. And they didn't have a great replacement on the roster. They thought they had somebody lined up in the winter. That kid ended up at Michigan State at the last minute. That was like a head-to-head battle that they lost. So they had to hit a home run. And to go out and get the number one tackle in the spring portal that pretty much everybody wanted, like if there's a good tackle that goes in, everybody wants them because nobody has enough of those guys. To be able to build that relationship, I think was a huge momentum boost. And if you're Brendan Sorsby, probably sleeping a little bit better at night as we go into the summer.
Chad, how much did they have to fight off others for Brendan Sorsby? Was there a big NIL market for him? I mean, I think the Big 12 as a whole was probably just everybody was having to defend because it's a great league of quarterbacks right now. But how much chatter was there about people trying to slide into his DMs at all?
Oh, his DMs were busy. I think his DMs have been busy all the way up through maybe the past couple weeks. If you've been following along at what's happening, if I had to guess.
Oh, yeah.
But I think, there was a really good team that, you could maybe highlight in neon green that was interested. And then another team that, they don't have to play in a conference, but they still need a quarterback that I think was probably interested as well. So, he definitely was a popular guy. And the good thing about Brendan is he's been very loyal to Cincinnati. That was tested last year, right before he had to enroll at Cincinnati after transferring from Indiana.
Right.
USC called and tried to get him to head out west to LA. And he said, look, I'm committed. I'm signed. I'm getting ready to start classes. So they've had to fight off a lot of heavy hitters for Brendan Sorsby. A lot of coaches around the country think very highly of him. So, that's a big plus for the quarterback position for the Bearcats.
Yeah, no, I was really excited to see him come back. I thought that was a massive deal for you guys. And so he's still got some refinement, but you can see there's a lot to like there for sure. I hate to bring the mood down, but there's obviously a very sad story going on in Cincinnati right now with the passing of Jeremiah Kelly, freshman football player who passed away unexpectedly. There's not a lot of details. Details don't matter, but just how's everybody kind of reacting and doing? Just a sad story anytime, there's a tragedy, somebody passes away suddenly. Just kind of, I guess, what's been the reaction to that amongst the Bearcats community?
It's been a very big blow internally. Freshmen, especially they've only been here for a couple months. They don't generally make a big splash impression. Jeremiah Kelly had. He had a great smile, great personality. He was really, really well liked and respected quickly in the offensive line room. Not only that, but he was taking reps in the 2 deep at guard and center already. And he was supposed to, unfortunately, as sad as it is, like should be going to prom right now, which makes it even more tragic. He enrolled early. He came in, he worked, had a great, demeanor about him, and guys were really drawn to him. And, I know I've heard from some people in that offensive line room that guys are devastated because he had come in and quickly assimilated himself into the program, into what it was, like being a college football player. He wasn't a guy that, they had to light a fire under him to get up in the morning and make it to workouts. He wasn't a guy that, a coach had to get in his butt all the time to get the motor revving. He was a guy that had a ton of promise. And you guys have been around this long enough. You do not see guys come from high school and instantly work themselves into an offensive line room. Usually it's, hey, we'll see you in 2 years. Enjoy your stay. And Jeremiah Kelly had already worked his way, pretty high up the depth chart. And everybody's been pretty devastated by it because he was a really good kid, a contagious personality, great smile. And it was a really rough one when that started spreading around yesterday morning. It's hit everybody pretty hard.
Chad, the NFL draft is tomorrow night. Corey Kiner, Luke Kandra, others. Who do you think is the most irreplaceable guy that they're going to lose? Kandra is Cincinnati to the bone. I mean, we talked to him at pro days, and my gosh, like I'm surprised that he doesn't bleed Skyline chili.
He might. Did you cut him?
No,
because if you cut him, he might have bled Skyline.
Yeah.
Luke is going to be very difficult to replace. Somebody that just gave you that constant, steady presence at guard. You never had to worry about him. You could run right over top of him. You knew he wasn't going to give up anything in the pass rush. Just a massive wall of a human that, I think it's going to be a challenge to just have anybody step right in. And, that's really the scary part. If you're a Cincinnati fan, not only is Kandra possibly to get drafted, but I think there's 2 others. John Williams, the left tackle that I mentioned, and then also D'Artagnan Tinsley, who was the left guard. A lot of NFL teams like as well. And if he doesn't get drafted, he will absolutely be a priority guy in free agency on the offensive line. So replacing 3 of those guys is going to be tough because they're all 3 NFL quality at right guard, left guard, and left tackle. And then, Kiner was special. Multiple 1,000-yard seasons, a guy that was great at the line of scrimmage. His contact balance was amazing. And, he did not, only like a handful, 4 or 5 times was he stopped for a loss all season. And he got hit quite a bit behind the line. He just knew how to keep his footwork, keep his legs moving, and in worst case scenario, get back to the line of scrimmage or pick up a yard so that you're not playing behind the sticks. So I think they did a pretty good job replacing him with Tyree Walker, who is a similar type player from Wisconsin, almost rushed for 1,000 yards in the Big Ten last year. But Corey was kind of a tone setter in the locker room, a guy that, everybody kind of looked up to and admired his work ethic and always had a smile on his face and never really complained. And you need those guys when you're establishing culture. So those are the 4 guys I think have an opportunity to get drafted. All 4 will be difficult to replace. But, man, Kandra came here with Satterfield from Louisville and instantly stepped in and had an amazing 2 years on that offensive line.
Yeah, those are some dudes right there. We really enjoyed talking to Corey and Luke at Big 12 Combine, and they represented the school very well. It was cool chatting with those guys. I love, like, you got so much cool stuff behind you. I like your set. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff to look at. And you've got like this, I don't know what you would call that, like the scrolling schedule thing that's got the.
I saw that.
Yeah, I love
it's
that.
Called a team ticker.
Team ticker. Okay, a team ticker. I love the team ticker. And it popped up at one point when I was looking at it, the Nebraska game, which I think was already probably pretty exciting. Nebraska's rolling into Cincy coming up to start the season. I imagine people don't need a lot of reason to get excited about that. But after Matt Rule popping off, does that add a little extra something to that, to kind of like, we need to represent the Big 12 and kind of show him what's what after he's kind of bad-mouthing the conference a little bit?
That game's not in Cincinnati. That game is in the heart of Big 12 country.
It's in Kansas City, right?
Is it
Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City.
Okay. Well, thanks for correcting me. Okay. Good to know that.
Yeah,
good to know.
It was one of those COVID series that kind of got all jumbled up because there was supposed to be a game the COVID year that got canceled, and then they had to restructure some things. Then it was going to be in Indy, and then the people at Arrowhead called and said, "Hey, we'll give you an extra $2 million to move the game here." And Cincinnati said, "Where do we sign?"
Yeah,
sounds good. I mean, Matt Rule, what are we doing, buddy? Like, is there a more disappointing program in the past 15 years than Nebraska? They've been to what, one bowl game in a decade? How about you just shut up and win games? You guys know there's a little bit of like Matt Rule history, right? He coached at Temple.
Yeah, and then
Cincinnati
Baylor
was in the American.
and
they played each other a couple times. And 1 year, I think it was his last year at Temple, Temple won and ran their player. They won on a field goal at the last second, and their players ran down the Cincinnati sideline, taunting the Cincinnati players. So there's a little Matt Rule bad blood in there.
Well, hey,
that's a hell of a game. I'm glad to know that it's an Arrowhead, but that's a heck of a game. That's a big opportunity for Cincy right out of the gates.
It'd be a nice win, really, for both of you, whoever wins that game. Yeah,
and it's Thursday night of Labor Day weekend.
Nice.
So that's going to be a single, slot. Everybody, eyes of the country on that game on a Thursday night, right, leading into Labor Day weekend. So that's going to be an interesting one, and it could be a tone setter for Scott Satterfield. If they win that game, they get a lot of momentum. It reminds me of a game, Luke Fickell's second year. They had had a really bad year one. They went 4-8, but they could have gone 1-11. Luke Fickell's first year. And they opened that season on the road in the Rose Bowl against UCLA, and they grind out that win, Desmond Ritter's first start at quarterback, and they grind out that win, and that vaulted them to a double-digit win season and really kicked off the string of events that ultimately led to them going to the college football playoff and having 9 guys drafted in 1 year. It'll be interesting to, if they get that win in Arrowhead against Nebraska, hopefully that's some momentum that they feel.
Last thing, Chad, thanks for your time. Dan Skillings, we talked about the trade for a player to be named later with Avi Celestine going to Cincinnati. I saw him, and I think I even texted you. I watched a game in Waco where I thought he was very, very talented, very skilled. I wondered about some things, but we had him on. Seemed to be a really, really engaging young man. Your thoughts about him? Was he one of those that wasn't quite tough enough inside, or is that just an NIL thing?
No, I think with Dan, and I don't know if you guys talked about this when you had him on, but Dan didn't start playing organized basketball until late. So his first year really of organized basketball was his sophomore year in high school. And he elevated steps pretty quickly, which is you're 6'6" and you're long and you're athletic. Like if you put in the work, it's easy to kind of make meteoric jumps.
Yep.
And it's after his sophomore year, he's honorable mention all Big 12. And I wonder if maybe he let up a little bit in the offseason. Not that he didn't work, but like the mindset of I'm playing catch up to the mindset of I'm at this level. I just wonder if maybe last year he worked on, he's wanting to develop other parts of his game. And I think that got him away from what made him who he was as a freshman and sophomore.
Okay.
Rebounding, doing a little bit of the extra stuff, being more of a part of the unit as opposed to like a focal point. And I think he struggled being top of the scouting report.
Okay.
The rebounding dipped, the defense, the attention to detail, some of that stuff dipped. But the talent is in there. If Dan gets back to, focusing on what makes Dan really good, I think it's in there because there's not many guys. His superpower from the wing is his ability to rebound. He will get some rebounds this year for Baylor where you guys are like, where the hell where did his arm come from?
Mm-hmm.
He needs to worry about some of that stuff and just let the rest come naturally. And if he does that, he can get back to the point where he was, a 13 point per game scorer that got 6.5, 7 rebounds a game and really made an impact for Cincinnati 2 years ago. This past year, I just think he kind of got lost in it a little bit. And I'm pulling for him. I've liked Dan. I got to know him in AAU for Philly Pride when he was playing on the Under Armour circuit. I've always thought very highly of him. I hope he does well, but he needs to get back to what makes Dan Skillings great and not worrying about what do NBA scouts want to see. What are, take the outside noise and shut it out and go be great at what you're great at. And then I think he can be a very important piece for you guys.
Chad, great to see you, man. Thank you very much. When we need Cincinnati information, we go to Chad Brendel, Bearcat Journal.com. We appreciate his time.